Holly's Thomas sat beside the small swimming pool in his backyard and watched his wife Tiffany and their best friend Kavort in the surf of the Gulf of Mexico. In days past, as he watched them play together in the surf, he would also look at his surroundings and nearly burst with pride. He would be thinking about the culmination of their childhood dreams. They had achieved a major portion of their dreams because they escaped the cold, dreary winters of their birth city in what they considered the cold, frigid north, and were living the dream in sunny Florida. Now, on this day, he was not thinking about them escaping their birth city for this slice of paradise. Now, as he watched the couple play, he became upset once again as he remembered some of the rumors beginning as far back as his high school days and continuing to the present. He totally ignored his pleasant surroundings and keyed in on what was actually occurring in the surf and sand. Up until the middle of the past week, he can honestly say he loved both Tim and Tiff more than any other people on this earth. For years, he had trusted them with his very life, with his happiness, even with his soul. They were almost as one. If one was sad or unhappy, they all were. If one of them hurt, they all did. Now he understood the trust and love he once held for them was misplaced. Holly's Tiff and Tim met on their first day of middle school when they were all placed in the same homeroom. Somehow they hit it off immediately and formed a bond that lasted through high school and college for him and Tiff. Timothy was a slacker deluxe. He was the typical beach bum, even before he had a beach on which to practice his art. He really had no ambition. He always dressed in surfer dude clothes and talked the beach bum talk interspersed with the slang of the drug culture. Every sentence he uttered was filled with surfer and toke or slang. Hollies never knew Tim to use hard drugs, but he was an expert in the use and abuse of weed and alcohol. Like many young men who acted like he did, there was something about him that the women loved. They flocked around him like bees to honey. He was a handsome, tan young man who knew all the right things to say to a woman. Tim could bed nearly any woman he decided he wanted, and it seemed as if he wanted them all. Until recently, Hollies thought he restrained his urges when it came to his best friend's wife, but now he knew differently. The three friends graduated high school together and applied to colleges together. The only colleges they considered were those in Florida. The location of the college or university was more important than its reputation or the degrees they could obtain there. They all were accepted to the same college and moved in together when they began their higher education. It only took Tim a semester to flunk out and declare college was not for him. He gravitated to the beaches near Fort Myers, fell and lived hand to mouth for the remainder of his friends' college careers, seeing them nearly every weekend and most summers. While Hollies and Tiff were in college, Timothy worked several part-time jobs on and close to the beach. He worked at times for a pool company, local beachside businesses, and a local beach rental shop. For some reason, that was where he shined. He could rent sand to an Arab. Hollies decided he was so successful because the tourists loved his surfer dude Pater, while he talked them into rentals or purchases. Hollies' employer owned the beach rental company with a small retail store attached as well as a larger tool and equipment rental outlet where Hollies worked. The store in which Tim worked mostly sold beach rental equipment, but also sold anything that could be used on the beach from chairs to swimsuits, sunblock, drinks, and so forth. Tiffany and Hollies majored in business in college. Tiffany took a degree in marketing. Hollies had a double major, taking a degree in management information systems and business management. When they graduated, they both managed to get jobs quickly. Hollies began working in the equipment rental business for Tim's employer, quickly rising to store manager and second in charge to the owner. Tiffany obtained a job selling clothing in a beachside boutique and quickly rose to assistant manager. All three of the friends worked within a half-mile of each other and saw each other daily. Hollies and Tim, working for the same employer, saw or talked to each other several times during the days and days. Many days Tim would make a point of telling Hollies he and Tiff had lunch together. Their businesses were on the same block, and they even spent most of their breaks together. Rumors started to circulate once again about Tim and Tiff, but once again Hollies ignored them. After all, they were all friends from childhood, and he trusted them. Tiffany had already gone with Tim when they were younger and found him not to be husband material. After all, she rejected him and married Hollies, so he had no reason to worry, did he? Other than women and anything done on the beach, Tim had one true passion in his life. He loved Mustang automobiles. If the conversation was about cars, he was in the middle of it talking about the Ford Mustang. His first car was a Mustang, as had been each succeeding one. He finally managed to get enough money ahead to purchase a new Mustang, but it was not just a Mustang. He bought a Shelby in ruby red metallic with black accents. When he wasn't chasing glory holes or hitting the beach, his free time was spent cleaning, babying, and modifying his first love, the Mustang. Tiffany was the first person to ride in his new car and was seen many times riding with him thereafter. Hollis remembered the good times when he and his two best friends would take a road trip or go camping or just hang out. Tiffany was always there for both of them, but she was his. She was just Tim's friend only, she said. Now it looked as if she was more even back then. She never said she was a friend with benefits, but apparently that is what she was and still is. It was only the past week when he was finally slapped in the face with her disrespect and cheating. He finally discovered the rumors over the preceding years were correct. Hollis almost wished he hadn't volunteered to deliver another set of rental scaffolding to a work site the day he discovered his betrayal. He was bored and the renter claimed it was urgent he receive the scaffolding immediately, so Hollis told his boss he would deliver it. If not for that, he could have remained blissfully ignorant a while longer. He would never have known the rumors were true. He felt his stomach clench with anger once again as he remembered what he saw while he watched what he now knew were the not-so-innocent goings-on in the surf. How could he have been so blind? Everything was crystal clear now. The day his life turned to shit was a gorgeous day. Business was slow, it being a Tuesday, so when the order came into the store, he told Mr. Wilson he would deliver the scaffold instead of asking their driver to work late. That not only saved them the overtime they would have paid the driver, but got him out of the store for an hour or so, and it made a good customer happy. A win-win situation, but in the end he lost. He decided to return to the store on Beach Road, the one that meandered past Tiffany's and Timothy's workplaces. He passed the small building, almost a shack, in which Tim worked just in time to see Tiffany meet Tim outside the door with a steamy kiss. His hands rose under her loose blouse and mauled her breasts for a moment, then he rushed her through the door. As she entered the building, he ran his hand under her skirt, and she turned, smiling and giggling. She bent forward slightly at the waist and grabbed Tim's arm as she continued into the building backwards. As soon as the door closed behind them, she grabbed Tim for another long kiss. There was no doubt she was the aggressor that time. Tim quickly put a "close for lunch" sign on the door and followed Tiffany deeper into the building. Tiffany was laughing and pulling Tim along by his hand. Hollis quickly pulled his new F-150 into the parking lot beside Tim's Mustang. He walked, almost ran toward the store and peered into the building. He couldn't see anything. The lights were off and the door locked. No one was in sight. That meant they must be in the stockroom or exited the building via the stockroom door. Hollis moved around toward the back of the building and moved a garbage can underneath a high, dingy window. When he climbed onto the can, he could just barely pull himself up enough to see part of the room. He heard voices but couldn't understand them. He quickly jumped down and stacked a couple of pallets under the garbage can and once again climbed onto it. Now he could see more of the room and his world ended. Tiffany was laid across some waist-high boxes, her blouse and bra open, her glorious breasts out for Tim to see and maul what she was doing. Tiff's skirt was hiked up to her waist and her little panties were pushed to the side. Tim already had started his motions. As he watched, her heels came up and locked behind Tim's thighs. She almost violently pulled into her with her legs as he thrust inward. Now he could hear her moans and grunts as Tim Jack hammered her ruthlessly, her breast rocking back and forth as she took him in. Hollis pulled his phone from his pocket and took several pictures, then moved off the garbage can and away from the building. He was seething with anger, his mind whirling with thoughts, many of which he really didn't remember afterward. He was devastated, broken, cast adrift, as only can occur in these or similar circumstances. His perfect life shattered in the space of a few painful moments on an otherwise glorious day. When he returned to work, his boss knew something was wrong, but Hollis refused to discuss it with him. All he would say was, "I just realized things aren't always what you expect or believe them to be. I found out this afternoon that I was mistaken about something I thought I knew. Now I have to rethink my whole outlook on life." Hollis shook himself from his memories of the past week and continued watching his cheating slut wife and ex-best friend as they wrestled and fondled each other in the breaking waves. He was almost crying as he listened to Tiffany's girlish, happy screams and giggles and Tim's deep laughs. He watched and made plans, then discarded them only to make another one. As he thought, he looked around the house and yard. He was going to miss this place, perhaps more than he would miss Timothy, and maybe almost as much as he would miss Tiffany. At least all they would be out was the rental. Now he was glad they hadn't had enough savings to make the down payment and agreed to a lease to purchase agreement. Hollis was still running plans through his mind when a glowing Tiffany came running back into the yard, holding Tim's hand and pulling him with her. She was laughing and flirty, one of the things that drew Hollis to her years ago. He loved her effervescent personality, her constant good humor and loving, cuddly personality. Now he knew he should have questioned her devotion to him when she continued displaying those traits to others after they became engaged and married. He just convinced himself it meant nothing. It was just her personality. Now he knew it wasn't just her personality, or perhaps it was. She was a cheat and a flirt. When Tiffany came closer to Hollis, she stopped and looked at him, still panting somewhat from her prior activity. Only then did she drop Tim's hand. She said, "Honey, why the sour look? It's a beautiful day and we're all together. Why do you look so down?" She bent forward and gave him a quick kiss on the lips that he managed to partly evade. "Oh, nothing you don't know about Tiff. Just thinking about last week and a problem I uncovered at work. I'll get it figured out and solved pretty soon and get back to the normal I expect." "So why are you in such a good mood this afternoon?" Tiffany let her smile slip a little and looked at Tim before she answered. Hollis thought he saw something more than friendship in that look. Honestly, he knew it was the same look she always gave Tim, but this time he read the true meaning behind it. She said, "Well, we're all together, and Tim and I have had a really fun swim, and now we're ready for a nice meal and some quiet time chilling with each other. What are you going to cook for us this evening?" "Oh, was I elected cook for the group again today? It sure seems as if I am elected to that position a lot. I even have to cook when we meet at Tim's place. Doesn't seem right to me, does it you?" "Oh, well, it really doesn't matter. I'm afraid I never gave it a thought because I was busy thinking about my problem. I guess you and Tim will have to come up with something. Or maybe we can just throw some sandwiches together." "Oh, Hollis, how could you? You always fix a nice meal when we get together. That's part of the fun on the weekends, watching you fix us a good meal, then eating it as the sun goes down. I can't believe you just sat there and stared into space and let the meal go. Now what can we do?" Her eyes sparkled and she grabbed Tim's hand and turned to Hollis and said, "I know. You can chill some wine and set the table, and Tim can take me for a ride in his Shelby. We'll buy some takeout and we can all eat out here on the patio. I've heard about a fabulous new restaurant downtown, and this will be the perfect time to try it." Tiffany rushed into their bedroom and quickly changed into a sundress and sandals. When she came back onto the patio, she smiled and said, "Well, come on, Tim, let's hit the road." She grabbed his hand and pulled Tim toward the front door and the parked cars. Her eyes were glistening as she turned back to Hollis and said, "We probably won't be back for about an hour and a half, honey. We have to give them time to prepare the food after we get there. I'll call when we start back." Hollis stood in shock as he saw the front door close. He heard the Shelby rumble to life and the chirp of tires as Tim got on it. He couldn't believe what just occurred. Oh, sure, similar things had occurred in the past, but this was more blatant, or perhaps he was just seeing it with a new perspective. Many times after Tim and Tiff wrestled and roughhoused together, she or Tim would find an excuse for the two of them to run an errand together. Until now, Hollis never thought much about it. They had been doing similar things since middle school. Heck, occasionally he and Tiff would take off and leave Tim alone back then too. Of course, they never or almost never had sex like he now suspected Tiff and Tim were doing. Of course, now that they were married, they didn't have to run off. If they got so worked up, they had to make love. They just excused themselves and went into the bedroom or waited until Tim left and they went to bed. Hollis signed and returned to the patio in his chair. He took his glass and bottle of the Balvine with him. He never even made an effort to chill the wine or set out the plates in silver. He never even moved an hour and a half later when a giggling Tiffany called to tell him they were on the way home. When the two lovers returned almost 2 hours later, he was feeling no pain and, except for walking into the yard to piss, had not moved from his chair or done anything except drink the entire time they were gone. Tiffany was laughing and chattering as she and Tim came in the front door. They noisily tramped through the house and exploded into the kitchen. When she came out onto the patio, her chatter stopped, as did she. Tiffany looked at the still unset table and turned to Holly's. She said, "Holly's, what in the world have you been doing? I thought you were going to chill some wine and set the table while we were gone. It doesn't look as if you've even moved since we left. What the hell is wrong with you today? Hurry up and get the table set so we can eat. We're famished." Holly's looked at Tiffany with sadness, but made no comment. Her disheveled appearance said it all. Her hair was mussed, her lips puffy and red, and her nipples tinted out the thin top she wore. It was obvious she was without a bra. He was positive she had one on when they left. Somehow, during a trip to obtain takeout supper, her normally neat appearance had morphed into a well-fucked one. Tiff made no notice of Holly's sorrowful look. She just continued berating him for not being ready to eat when they arrived. While Tiff was talking to Holly's about his failing, Tim unloaded the meal onto the table. He wouldn't or couldn't look Holly's in the eye. Holly's looked at each of them, then stood and walked into the kitchen without comment. When he returned, he only carried his own plate and silver. He quickly loaded it with the admittedly great-smelling food and sat down. He was already eating before Tiffany stormed into the house for her, and Tim's eating utensils and plates. As she returned, she berated him once again for not setting the table for all of them. Holly's looked up at her and said, "Look, I'm tired and hungry. You were both able to walk into the kitchen for your own place settings. It wouldn't take that much effort for you to carry your own utensils and plates out here, so I'll let you do it." He turned to his meal once again. After he filled his plate, Tim sat across from Holly's and ate a few bites before he said, "Dude, this is such a bogus man. Why are you down on us like this? You didn't cook, and then you get all high and mighty after we make a trip for some good food and refuse to even help serve it. Man, this is so not like you, dude. We're brothers. You gotta have my back here, dude. Help out, you know? That is some sweet woman you got there, dude, and you're not helping her at all as a total insult, you know." Holly's looked up at Tim and felt his anger surge. He glanced at a guilty-looking Tiffany before returning his attention to Tim. Tiffany was staring at her plate and trying to ignore the two men at the table. Holly said, "Well, Tim, I really don't see where it's any of your business what I do in my own house, you know, dude. I know you're used to me paying for everything when we're together and fetching and caring for us all, but that is going to change. I intend to relax on the weekends just like you and Tiff do. That means I'm through doing it all for you, and you need to begin to pull your own weight here, dude." Tiffany gasped and looked up at Holly's in surprise. Holly's looked at his wife and said, "What? Do you have a problem with that, honey?" "Well, it's just, Tim doesn't make enough to pay his own way when we do things together. He just barely makes enough for his car payment and rent. We've always taken care of each other. Why are you trying to change things now?" "Well, let me see. We're all adults here. We all work and are responsible for ourselves and our actions." "Am I right?" Tiff whispered. "Yes. Well then, that means if we're together we should help each other, and when we're separate we should pay our own way. Normally, if someone is in a home as a guest, they at least offer to help, but they aren't expected to do so or to provide food for the homeowner. I have noticed no matter where we get together, you and Tim play and party while I fix the meal, serve it, and clean up. I am expected to spend our money for the items served as well. I don't believe this is an equal relationship we have here, and I'm tired of the inequality and unfairness in the relationship." Needless to say, the evening devolved into one of acrimony, accusations, and hurt feelings. Holly's was not ready to tell the other two why he decided to take a hard line in the friendship/relationship, but they knew he was upset about something. For the next 2 weeks, he spent as much time as possible watching Tiffany and Timothy. Each week, he caught them numerous times kissing and fondling. Twice one week and 3 times the other, he actually got more pictures of them making love on company time. Hell, by his count, Tiff and Tim spent more time making love with each other than he and Tiff did before he caught them. Tim was certainly receiving more than half of the sex Tiff passed out. On Friday of the second week, Hollis walked into the owner's office and said, "Sir, I've been running some numbers in my spare time the last week or so. I think we can increase profits substantially if we close the store and beach rental unit and let Tim go." Mr. Tompkins gave Hollis a sharp look and frowned before he said, "I thought Tim was your friend, Hollis. Why would you recommend we close his store and fire him? There are times when we could use another employee here in the rental center. Wouldn't that be a better choice than just closing the other store and firing your friend?" In some cases, I suppose that would be a better call, but in this case, that would be counterproductive, sir. Hollis leaned forward and gave Mr. Tompkins a copy of his figures before continuing his discussion. I have several reasons for my recommendation, sir. First and foremost is the store itself. During the busiest months of tourist season, it is constantly busy and generates a good addition to the bottom line. However, in the off-season, it does not even pay operating expenses. If we only operated the store from April through September, I have included numbers for each choice. If you sell or rent the building, we could save a portion of the lot for a mobile store that was only operated those 5 months and generated much higher profits for the business when the lease income is factored in. Sale of the building would also add to the bottom line of the business by either allowing us to purchase other equipment to rent or by increasing interest income. Finally, I believe the continued employment of Tim would adversely impact this business because of his personal life and work habits. Hollis leaned forward and slid an envelope toward Mr. Tompkins before he continued talking. He said, "I have found that on an unknown number of days, Tim has closed the business during working hours while he had sex with a woman in the stockroom. He is therefore guilty of stealing from the business because he continued to receive his pay for those closings. I have documented 7 instances during the last 2 weeks when the store was closed for almost an hour in mid-afternoon. These closings are in addition to its authorized lunch period. These unauthorized closings have adversely affected the business because of potential unknown lost sales and rentals. In addition, I am unable to continue working with him. I am not submitting an ultimatum to you, sir, but if he is retained as an employee, I will seek employment elsewhere. What I can't believe you would do that. Why, you Tim and Tiffany have been friends. Hell, you've been closer than friends for most of your lives. Yeah, I suppose we were at least on the outside. I have recently discovered things weren't as I believed them to be. Tim is definitely not my friend and Tiffany will not be my wife much longer. That envelope contains the reason I have made these statements, sir." Mr. C. Tompkins frowned and opened the envelope after giving Hollis a hard look. When he saw the first picture, he sharply inhaled. He quickly looked at the other pictures, then looked up at Hollis. "Son, I just don't know what to say. I understand why you won't work with Tim. Heck, I even understand why you say Tiffany won't be your wife much longer. What I wonder about, though, is your desire to close the beach rental business. I have to wonder if it is a sound business decision or revenge." Hollis looked at his boss and sighed, then said, "Well, sir, I was afraid you would think that. I would be lying if I said what happened between Tiff and Tim didn't color my decisions, but I think any accountant would agree with my recommendation. I suggest we get our accounting firm to double-check my figures, but I am confident they make sense for the business. That store is marginally profitable on an annual basis and the funds tied up, and it could be better used elsewhere. My computations show the operation only adds about $600 per month average to your bottom line. Rental on the building or interest on the sales price when invested would far exceed those numbers." The business accounting firm agreed with Hollis' assessment of the beachfront property. In fact, their numbers were even harsher than Hollis's. After everything was factored in, the continued operation of the business resulted in a net loss to the business because Hollis forgot to include depreciation and insurance in his numbers. The store was closed and Tim fired. On the day he was terminated, Hollis instructed his attorney to serve Tiffany divorce papers. He spent the morning moving out of their rented house and into a small apartment within walking distance of his work. He was in the store once again working when he received a phone call from Tiffany. He debated even taking it, then decided he needed to get the unpleasant conversation out of the way. His stomach was churning when he said, "Hello, Tiffany. What do you want?" He expected to immediately hear her ranting about the divorce. Instead, she said, "Did you know about this mess? Why didn't you tell us Brad, Mr. Tompkins, was going to close the beachfront store and fire Tim? I thought we were all friends. How could you let him do that? Couldn't you at least have talked him into moving Tim to the store you work in? He was behind in his rent and car payments before. Now he has no way to make his payments. I've told him he can move in with us until things get better for him. Can you take off early and help him move?" "No, I don't think so. Mr. Tompkins and I have been by the store several times during business hours and found it closed. Tim was nowhere to be found. The store was not even breaking, even so he decided to close it. As for helping Tim move, there is no way I'll do that. Now, I've got to go." About 30 minutes later, Tiffany called again. This time, Hollis answered the phone and wished he hadn't. She began screaming as soon as she heard his voice. Hollis, how could you? You got Tim fired, didn't you? And now you're divorcing me. How could you do this? We've all been together forever, and all at once you're just dropping us and cutting us out of your life. Just like that. Well, Tiff, how could you cheat on me? How could you fuck Tim and not expect me to dump him and your sorry ass? What? I wasn't cheating on you. I never did and never would. Whatever gave you that idea? Maybe because I have pictures of you and Tim fucking? Maybe because I've seen you kissing him and letting him play with your tits and twat. Maybe that gave me the idea you were cheating. Hollis, I never, not once, let any other man or woman have sex with me. Not once. Then what were you doing when Tim had his pecker in you? That wasn't sex. Well, I suppose it was, but I prefer to think we were making love just like you and I do. Oh, Hollis, how could you? Hollis, I thought you understood. Hollis, it's always been just us. The three of us. We've always been together. You know, you've known from grade school I've loved you both to death. You've both said to me and each other that you love us. Hollis, you've always known Tim, and I have something special just like you and I do. You're surely not trying to divorce me because of Tim. Honey, I love you. I love Tim. I've always known I would be married to you. Tim needs us to live and die. We need Tim to be happy too. If you loved Tim enough to fuck him, why did you marry me? Well, you are more stable. You can support the children better when we have them. Tim can't even pay his own way, but he's special. The three of us make a great team and will be so good with the children when they come. Tim can teach them how to live and love life. I can mother and nurture them, and you can teach them responsibility and work ethics. Don't you see? What we have makes a perfect whole. When Tim has a small shortfall, you can make it up, and we all live better just like we do now. No, Tiffany, I don't see. I suppose I never did see what was actually going on. Goodbye, Tiffany. Hollis slammed the phone down and stood there seething. He was so angry he was shaking and his face was red. The bitch had all but admitted she had always been fucking them both and was even helping pay Tim's bills with their income. Fuck, how could he have been so wrong, so blind? Not surprisingly, Tiffany immediately offered to let Tim move into the house and live with her. Even then, Tim couldn't make his car payments. 2 months after the split, Tim wandered into the store late in the afternoon. Hollis walked around the counter and met him near the door, planning to kick him out. Before he could say anything, Tim said, "Dude, you gotta help me, man. They're trying to take my car. I can't let them do that. Tiff made the payment last month, but we're tapped out now. Can you float me a loan, man? What? You fuck my wife and prove you've never been my friend, and now you come in here and ask me to loan you money for your damn car? Get your ass out of here before I beat the crap out of you." Whoa, dude, what's with the bad vibes, man? Sure, I nailed your old lady, but you were like nailing mine too. I mean, she was with us both. You know, we both thought you knew that and were cool with it. But this is a different man. We've always been buds and had each other's back. I need your help here, dude. We can sort the sharing of our woman out later. Holly smiled and said, "You know, maybe I can take care of you after all, Tim. Let me clock out here and we'll go to your bank and take care of this." Tim brightened up and smiled. He clapped Hollis on the back and said, "Righteous dude, I knew I could count on you." When they got to the bank that held the loan on Tim's car, they asked to speak to a loan officer. After they were seated, she asked what they could do, and Holly said, "I understand you hold a loan on Tim Reading's Mustang. He says he is behind and you are going to repossess it. I've agreed to take over the payments so you don't have to take his car. Is that okay?" Well, I can't really say. Tim broke in and said, "Well there, dude, I didn't say I was going to give up my ride here, man. I just wanted a loan for the payments, man." Hollis looked at the loan officer and said, "Excuse us a moment, please. I want to explain things to Tim here. Tim, all I'm doing is putting the loan and car in my name so I can make the payments and we can take care of the car here. I'll take over the payments and keep the bill paid up, and you won't have the credit problems any longer." Tim relaxed and smiled, then said, "Oh, cool, dude. Right on. Let's get it done." The loan officer took Holly's information and ran a credit check. She smiled after she finished and said, "I see no problem with you taking over the payments on Mr. Reading's auto, Mr. Thomas. I can also take care of the new title request for you to turn into the state. Let me complete a few forms here and get some signatures and we'll get things taken care of." She quickly stood and walked into a storeroom for the paperwork. After the loan officer left, Tim sat up straighter and turned to Holly's before he said, "Dude, what's this about changing the title to your name, man? I told you I can't lose my ride." "Hey, just chill, Tim. Since I'm taking over the payments for you, they have to do that to make things legal. You know the banks and government. It's their way or the highway." Tim relaxed once again and said, "Yeah, hell, I don't understand anything they do or say anyway. I was just worried about my ride, man. We're cool." In about 45 minutes, Tim had signed over his car to Holly's and Holly's paid the past due amount. When they got into Holly's truck, Tim acted just like the Tim of old. It was all Holly's could do not to knock his head off. When they got back to the store, Tim jumped out of the truck and almost ran around to the driver's side. He smiled and said, "Hey man, I scored some killer weed yesterday. Let's go to a couple J's and celebrate. I've got a dime bag in the car." "I can't right now, Tim. I have to finish taking care of the papers on your car." "Oh, cool. I thought we were done with that." "Yeah, hurry so I don't lose it, man. Catch you later, dude." Tim lit up Edge before he drove out of the parking lot. Holly soon followed, then turned off heading to the DMV to finish transferring the title to Tim's car. Holly's was so happy with his subterfuge she was almost dancing. He quickly completed the transaction and paid the fees, then left the building smiling. 2 weeks later, Holly's received the final divorce papers in the mail, as divorced when it was fairly painless. Tiffany and he made almost the same amount, so there was no maintenance involved. Savings were minimal. They kept their own vehicles and personal property in their possession. No fuss, no muss. He took his name off the lease for the small beachfront house they so loved and was free of her. He did miss that house, though, in the regular sex. Late Saturday night, after receiving the decree in the mail, or more accurately, early Sunday morning, Holly's rode one of the rental beach bikes to his old home. He carefully, quietly unlocked the door, thanked the stars Tiff hadn't changed the locks or asked for the key back, and quietly entered the house. He smiled when he saw what he expected to see. There on the table were the keys to the Mustang. He quickly picked them up and started to leave when he had another thought. "I wonder where the other set of keys are." He moved to the cabinet where Tiff always kept her purse and looked in it. Bingo! There was a Mustang key fob on her keychain. He took it to then left the house as quietly as he entered. Hollis walked up to the Mustang in the driveway and opened the door. Now comes the dangerous part. He had to get it away with as little fuss as possible. This was one noisy bitch to start and drive. He grimaced when the engine started. Damn, it sure did sound great, though. As quietly as he could, Holly's back from the driveway and drove down the street heading for his home. He would come back with his truck and pick up the bike he rode as soon as he got home, then wait for the fireworks. After he finished his lunch Sunday, Holly's received a phone call from an upset Tim. He was talking so fast, Holly's almost couldn't understand him. "Holly's, dude? It's totally a bogus, man. Some dude offered me a ride, man. You gotta help your dude." "What am I gonna do, man? Calm down, Tim. Just chill. There's nothing I can do for you." Hollis finally just hung up the phone on the still rattling Tim and sat in his chair smiling. By this time, Tim had obtained a part-time job working for a pool company. During the next week, Hollis made a point of driving the Mustang past the business address when Tim should be getting off work. Finally, on Thursday, he arrived as Tim was getting into Tiffany's car for the trip home after work. Hollis smiled to himself and tooted the horn as he motored past the two lovers. He could hear Tim's scream of hatred even over the rumble of the engine. He gave a little more gas to the rumbling car and disappeared into traffic before Tiff could get back onto the street. Mid-morning the next Saturday, Hollis was waxing the Shelby when a city patrol car stopped in the parking lot behind the car. The officer walked up to him and said, "Are you Hollis Thomas?" "Yes, officer. I am." "Is there a problem?" "Is this your vehicle, sir?" "Yes, it is." Hollis laughed and continued, "Well, I guess not really." The officer tensed up and looked at Hollis as he continued speaking. "It really is mine and the bank's. Do you have the registration and proof of insurance, please, sir?" "Sure. Give me a minute here." Hollis opened the door and dug in the glove compartment, then came out with the requested papers. As he handed them to the patrolman, he once again asked, "Is there a problem, officer?" "I'll just be here for a moment here, sir." The officer walked back to his patrol unit and ran the information. In a few minutes, he came back and handed the paperwork back to Hollis. He said, "We received a report from a Mr. Timothy, reading that his vehicle was stolen. The vehicle identification number he gave us for the stolen vehicle matches this one. He said he saw you driving the vehicle and wanted us to recover it. The registration and DMV records verify you own this vehicle. Can you shed any light on that subject, sir? Holly smiled and leaned on the car in the shade. He said, well, Mr. Reading used to own this vehicle, but couldn't make the payments. I agreed to take over the payments to keep his credit record clean. We went to the bank and I took over his loan and ownership of the vehicle. I really don't know what his problem is, but I suspect he was either high when we did the deal or when he made the report to you, sir. We used to be friends, but when my wife and I divorced, he cast his lot with her, and I'm afraid we aren't as tight as we used to be. I did let him retain use of this vehicle for 2 weeks before I removed it from his residence. I felt 2 weeks were long enough for him to make other transportation arrangements. I see. So you say he is into drugs and is trying to use the police to cause trouble because of your divorce? No, sir. I don't know how he feels about our divorce, and I really don't care. All I said was the drugs might explain his memory loss about the vehicle sale. Okay, sir. Sorry I bothered you. Sunday afternoon, Holly's was lying beside the pool when Tiffany and Tim stormed into view. Before he could get up, they overturned his chair and dumped him onto the hot concrete. Tim said, dude, why did you cop my ride? Man, I need the wheels back, man. Give me the keys. Hey, you came to me and begged for help. I gave it to you because we used to be friends and I felt a little guilty about your problems. You signed the car over to me to keep it from being repossessed. I now have a sweet ride, even if it isn't an F-150 4x4. Hell, it's a real chick magnet, and that helps, you know. Seems only fair in a way. We each still have a sweet ride. We just traded, you know. I got a Mustang for my wife. You know, I think I came out ahead in the whole deal. At least I don't have to worry about the Mustang cheating on me and taking off with some other man without my permission. Tiffany screeched, then stood there silently crying. Time stood looking at Holly's for a moment and said, man, that's totally cold, dude. Holly's looked up at the pair and said, yeah, it is what it is. Now get out of here before I call the cops. I don't want to see either of you again.